Yeah, I think we went into the Peace Corps.
Peace Corps?
How many teachers?
How many teachers?
How many Vista?
How many vistas?
Social service of what kind?
Social service?
I did social service.
How about creative?
Artists?
How many movie makers?
Yeah.
How about health professions?
Oh, business.
International business.
Health professions? International, anything? Clearly engineer. How many musicians do we have?
Astronauts, any astronauts?
All astronauts.
They've been there.
Virtual travel.
Virtual travel?
How many have lived abroad again?
How many have lived abroad again? So, anybody besides Dow want to be?
Nicholas, and I'm from Towson in '72, so Bangalore too. And I graduated with an emphasis in economics, which I then started working in a planning office, and gradually sort of segued into transportation, got more education, got an engineering license. And so I do community planning, basically from conceptualization of ideas all the way through to hard design, final delivery of plans, specs, and estimates for construction. Which has been very interesting because it's very multidisciplinary. I work with environmental planners and scientists a lot. I work with landscape architects. I work with economists, people who are involved in community development, public involvement, lots of different kinds of things. And I can jump from project type to project type, which Larry Meredith gave me an evaluation one time when I was a freshman, said I had the grasshopper approach to higher education. And I kind of continued that. I just started but it's been a lot of fun, and I've never been bored.
I was referring to martial arts.
Cynthia Scott, and I was in Bangalore 3, but I went to visit Bangalore 1 the year before. I did not graduate from here, but I ended up finishing up at Berkeley in anthropology, and then went on to Michigan for a master's in public health, and have a PhD in clinical psychology. But I use most of my behavioral science kind of curiosity with organizations. And I'm working now with organizations to do very large kind of cultural transitions, moving 55,000 people to a new way of doing things. So it incorporates my public health kind of background, and my real excitement is self-organizing groups and how to get communities of practice and interest together. So, and I live in San Francisco, and I had a kid. I have a 12-year-old, so I'm still on the heading into adolescence, and have the same thing yet, really. And so I just really feel like
Now I'm at my food bank. I'm in charge of giving away the books to the kids. And it's because of that sense of community that was really fostered here in Kalamazoo for me. And that's really very important to me, is community wherever I am and whoever I can include.
Very similar to Brandeis's History of Ideas program. Left that, came back, married this wonderful woman, and resided in the Bay Area, and got into a variety of different occupations, but settled in healthcare and a little bit later on in kind of the pension field, which are wonderful windows into some of the most functional areas of the country. And did a lot of speaking around this country, and will relate a story that I think talks about the venturesomeness of, I think, what Kalamazoo gives us, and that is, after I've been doing some health policy speaking around this country, I was asked by a professional association to speak to Canadian pension trustees about Canadian pensions. I said, well, there's a little bit of a problem with that. I'm not Canadian, don't have much Canadian intentions, and doesn't make a lot of sense. They said, you'll be just fine. And I said, fine, I'll be just fine. And plowed through it and did faculty work for Canadian trustees for several years, which was wonderful. And I don't think if I had, Einstein once said, never lose a sense of holy curiosity. And I don't think I've ever lost it, and that it's the greatest gift I've got from Palestine.
I'm Dan Dominic, Bangalore 1. Amazingly enough. I came out of Callison with a sense that I could make a difference, and that was the overwhelming result, that there was a change that needed to be made in the world, and that I felt like I could impact it. You know, come the revolution. Who talked about the false age of becoming the age of Aquarius. And ended up moving to Georgia, strangely enough, and continued with this thrust that I could make a difference. And yet, by the time I was about 29 or 30, realized that the revolution had become a very corrupt and useless thing. And as the Bible says, without a vision, the people perish, and I will surely perish. And my wife, of 32 years, Meg, introduced me to a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's going to stop. Doors are slamming all around the room. Because Christianity has been a disgusting religious thing of men that has been abusing people and being misused for hundreds of years. Yet the relationship with Christ and what Jesus stood for, if you want a revolutionary, if you want a pure philosophy, if you want it driven with a supernatural power where you can make a difference, then I urge you to look back into it. And since that time, my whole life has been continuing to look to where I can make a difference, but all through the filter of God. And it's just really been an amazing ride.
My name's Nancy Finn, Bangalore 2, and I think I walked away from this place feeling like I could do anything and learn anything. And so my career has mostly been involved in areas where I knew nothing about it, felt perfectly comfortable in doing it. So I did a lot. I worked in technical programs in college, electronics programs, machine technology, automotive programs, working primarily with non-native students, making it comprehensive for them. And then for the last 15 years of my career, worked primarily with manufacturers, designing and implementing training programs for frontline workers, again, who are primarily immigrants. I think two things. One is, when I designed those programs, they were always team-taught, sort of very strange programs when you consider the training programs for business and industry. I think the biggest thing that, the biggest effect Callison had besides that kind of thing on me is on my kids. I've got 3 kids, 2 of them who are old enough to be involved in international things. One is a Japanese major at University of Oregon when we went through it a bunch of years ago. The other is now teaching in Guadalajara international relations. The younger one's too young to sort of be really involved, but he's now talking about it. So I started last high school, junior year. So there's that. And then the other thing I was finding really interesting about this whole group is there's a lot of energy, and now not only do we have the energy, but we have experience. And I would sort of like to talk about, or have all of us talk about how we can use that experience to change the world, which is in sore need of changing. So maybe later on after this, so it's the conversations about that.
My name's Jack Dillman. I'm Bangalore 2 also. When I left Callison, I went to law school for a year, discovered that wasn't what I wanted to do, and went to the Peace Corps. I developed some curriculum in Micronesia called the Problem of Cultural Change in Traditional Societies. And that curriculum it's still being taught because at that particular time, Micronesia was going through its constitutional convention to become an independent country, and they had to write a constitution that balanced the traditional chieftain system with a democratic government. And so some of the curriculum that I helped develop during that time actually fed into the writing of the Constitution of the country. Because I was so turned on by that, education became something that I just fell in love with. And I didn't have an education degree, so I petitioned the governor of California for a degree, because Micronesia was becoming what the last trust territory of the United States. And the California Code of Education had a little clause in it that said that if you had taught in the United States for 2 years, you can be given a degree, and then you had to work on a master's after that to keep it. So I said, I was in Micronesia, that was United States, give me a credential. See, I learned that from Larry Meredith also. And sure enough, I got it. And with that degree, I went to Venezuela and discovered the world of international school systems. Larry Jackson spoke about it a little bit earlier, that he had been the superintendent of a school in Santiago, Chile. I went with that degree to Venezuela and taught in Venezuela for quite a long time, 2 different schools in Caracas. I married a Venezuelan, my children were born in Venezuela. And I got involved in a curriculum called the International Baccalaureate Program. The International Baccalaureate Program is pretty incredible. And the heart of it is just like Callison College, because there's a course called Theory of Knowledge. And I decided that I was going to teach Theory of Knowledge, whose curriculum is all questions, nothing else. It is a book like this of questions. And as a result of that, and the success of that, I brought the International Baccalaureate Program to Venezuela, and the board of directors asked me if I would become their principal, and I became the principal, and then I became the director of the school. I went from Venezuela to Costa Rica and was the director of the school there, and I went from Costa Rica to the Dominican Republic, where I am right now, and am the director of the school there. I'm also the president of the Association of American Schools for Latin America, and I sit on the board of directors of the Association for the Advancement of International Education. We basically are the think tank for international educators of the American school system outside of the United States. And all of you educators that are here that would like to participate in some way in that, I have a door to bring you into that kind of organization if you're interested in it. But it's been a wonderful career, and just by describing the career, I think I make it very clear the effect that Callison College has had upon me, and I thank you all.
My story is very long, but I'm going to get really short. My name is Barbara Shaw, real stupid. I was born and raised basically in the Middle East. Sure. I class of 71, and returned back to Iran after India, and married an Iranian. I have 2 children. I speak Farsi, and I'm trying to figure out, like Nancy's comment, I'm trying to figure out how to put on the shabur and go back to the Middle East and help. We'll see. Short story, but long.
But you worked for me in the Costa Rica.
I sure did. Had fun.
Chris Hasloo, Bangalore 2. I'm currently a full professor, tenured full professor in the Recording Industry Department at Middle Tennessee State University. Been there 26 years. Got out there with 80 students. We now have 1,780 in the program. I wanted to translate that. Tenured full professor Court alluded to that. Tenured full professor translated as "you kiss my ass." And God rewarded me for my work by making me a chair of the department where I have 20 full professors that I work with. And probably the thing that prepared me for the job I have now. Most of Callison, believe it or not, was being an RA in the dorm. But the fact that I chose academic life had to do with the tremendous time I had here. The fact that I am in audio engineering had to do with the work I do with Michael Scanlon, and Ned Dominic, Chris Dedman, and Jonathan Meredith, and Steve Whitmore over in the old KUOP labs. And, so I'm doing what I did there in a different way. Just one last thing. It's funny how things come around. I have a new boss. We just hired a new dean last year, and his name is Anantha Babli, and he comes from Hyderabad, and I have an in now.
I hope we can extend this time so that everyone's going to share if we can. My name is Jack Dunn. I came here from Santa Barbara from UC in 1971, and I was only here for a year. I came here for the express purpose of producing theater and working with artists and multimedia installation works of art, and the university was very generous and helped us produce 2 pieces of theater that were really wonderful events and filled with a lot of very creative people. And I came from a highly dysfunctional family. I was chemically dependent before I got here, and when I got here, my life changed gradually to the point where I had to leave mainstream reality and get some help about 15 years later. And ironically, I ended up being able to go back to Bangalore, and I was asked to run the largest chemical dependency treatment center in India and for 6 months. And my wife, who was my nurse when I finally hit the hospital, was instrumental in helping me build a career in chemical dependency counseling. And I was able to go back to Bangalore 6 times and work with people that later got huge grants for AIDS and AIDS treatment at chemical dependency facilities in India. So Callison has been a wonderful blessing for me. Thank you.
Mark Bowinkle, Callison 74. Part of my religious conversion experience at the age of 16 was a clear call of wanting to become a United Methodist minister, but I didn't want to be like any of the white male ministers that I knew. So I chose to come to Callison. And along with a residency year in India and 6 months in Mexico with Mickey Gibson, I picked up the craft of pottery from Alan Wilcox here, and I continued to practice as a potter. After graduation, went to graduate school at the School of Theology at Claremont, did a master's and a doctorate there that included a year's residency and study in Kenya and East Africa. My dissertation was published in 4 languages on the role of the pastor of rural development. It's now in its 2nd printing of 50. Oprah hasn't called yet. Right after graduation from seminary, we went to serve the Iban Methodist Church in northern Borneo. I was the principal of this seminary for 3 years. Came back, I've served local churches and am now in a Methodist church in Los Altos, California. I daily practice a breathing meditation taught to me and many of us by Ramchandra Rao. I continue to be a very active potter, and the greatest blessing of my Callison experience was as I met and married my life partner, Bonnie Minkler, the class of 73, and next month we celebrate our 31st wedding anniversary.
Well, Callison had a huge impact on my life, as you could tell. Actually, I went to Raymond after leaving UC Santa Barbara. I went to Raymond College for a year, and then I went to the University of East Africa for my junior year and dropped out of college because I didn't have any way to process that cross-cultural experience. And when I worked for a year, decided to come back to school, I chose Callison because of the international experience. And at that time, my father had been offered a job with USAID as a population officer in New Delhi in India. So my sister and I joined the class, jumped on
Not at all, and when I touched the Macintosh, decided I wanted to work for Apple Computer. And so I worked there for 5 years, and my first day on the job was a flight to Tokyo, and was in Japan most of that time. Not only Japan, but sort of East Asia. And after that, worked for another small high-tech company, and then have been consulting for high-tech companies, mostly internationally, sometimes domestically since then. So Japan definitely has played a very big role in my life. And much to the chagrin of my Japanese friends, my daughter goes to the Chinese American International School in San Francisco. She's in a Mandarin immersion program, and my son will probably go there as well. But definitely, it does get passed on to the next generation, and I'm very grateful for that. And I guess the one thing, more than anything, the thing that has stuck with me through all the years is just how wonderful the people have been, or were and have been, Callison people, the professors, but also friends that you run into at airports and restaurants in Tokyo and that sort of thing. And even though we don't see each other as much as we would like, it's just so wonderful that the history is there, and when we see each other, it's like we just sort of pick right up and keep moving forward. And it's that really has left the deepest impression with me from my Callison experience.
So I did a little waitressing, and then they fired me from that. And then I worked on campus here for a little while, COT, I don't know what. Moved to San Francisco and got a job with a cotton company, and I thought, well, managed to move into Macy's, worked for Macy's for 5 years, where I took care of trains and planes and transportation. And, we were importing things, and, we got work from lots of places. So I met my husband, and we married, and moved out of the city because we obviously couldn't afford to buy a house there. And got pregnant. I got to stay home for a number of years with our children. And during that time, our son was 8, Hasai, which is 8 in Japanese, and our daughter was Gosai Han, which is 5.5 in Japanese. And I took them to Japan for a month, put them in a kindergarten at a 2nd grade, and said, go to it. I took my parents with me that time. I was wanting that my children not have what I refer to now as English lockjaw. And that, that's a cultural and a language situation. We went back the next year, having had an exchange student stay with us. Akiko turned 17 when she was with us, and we had stayed with her parents while we were in Japan. And as we were leaving, or my son was going to go back with her first, and he was 9 then, and he said, I said, now when you get to Osaka, make sure you hold Akiko's hand, because she's Japanese, and she's got the language, and he said, don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of her. So this 9-year-old was a pretty self-assured young person, and Akiko in Japan, they raised them young. So, and he was right. He knew at 9 that he was older than she was at 17. So he did 2 weeks in Japan by himself at night with Akiko and her parents. I guess he cried himself to sleep a couple of times. He did miss us. Kayla and I came over, his little sister came over after 2 weeks, and He'd been out playing baseball and doing whatever a 9-year-old does in Japan, and go to school, because he got to go back to school. She joined him in the same school, and they went to school for only a week. We got our husband, or their daddy and my husband to come over. And the first time we were there, Kayla said, you know, how much longer till Daddy? How much longer till? It was too long away from Daddy. But so that was the beginning. And now my son has just graduated from college, and I'm about to send him back to Japan, I'm hoping, with his girlfriend, so that they can teach English and we can expand the horizons. I teach high school health, so I'm always telling them about travels and telling them if you go, go somewhere, see something, do something, and the old get your self-esteem thing in order. Oh, and when I was 19 and I turned 19 in India, at that point I figured out I can do anything. So demonstrating condoms in class is no big deal.
It's 4:30. We've been able to get some more time, but we only have like 15, 20 minutes more before they need this room, so we have to kind of pick up the pace again. Not that fast.
Okay.
Very well. I went to the Peace Corps in Marshall Islands after Amy Towson, married an ex-Peace Corps volunteer, and have spent my career in international development, program management. And he works for the Agency for National Development in the Philippines. And as a result of the world, our kids have gone to international schools. So the plan worked perfectly.
Randy Stoll, Allison, Bangalore 3. Interesting events. I came from Brazil as an exchange student after a year as an exchange. Came to Callison. Thought, oh, maybe sure, that sounds good, but it never be anything like Brazil. And it wasn't. But, first week orientation dinner. You go sit in the right in here, actually, right here where we are, sat next to this really beautiful young girl. Ted Thomas and I both spotted her at the same time. I moved in, stepped in front of him, sat next to her. We married, thanks to Larry. We performed the ceremony in the chapel 4 years later. We've been married 31 years, barely. So Callison gave us an academic criteria, gave us a basis. But we also learned some interesting things. That a preacher can make us laugh, can make us think. That an English teacher knew how to barbecue. That Jerry Hewitt could fix a clutch in a Volvo in a weekend. That John Moriarty could share the jug of wine if you really insisted. After we graduated, went to Monterey Institute of International Studies, when it's called Foreign Studies. Marilyn and I moved to Fairbanks, where we kind of planted ourselves, Fairbanks, Alaska. I only bring that up because after an education here and an education at MIFS, where I could speak fluent Spanish and Portuguese, I went to the only state where there are only 3 people who speak Portuguese. Anyway, it was a great experience. I just look around and see so many friends, so many warm faces, and what an experience. No, I did an award for the walk.
Stan Broker.
I'm Dana Russo, and you usually call me Billy Turtles. I did my freshman year back in Pennsylvania, then my folks moved out here to California, so I was in the charter class of Callison. And so the first year was great, but then I'll confess, between my started to think I might want to be a nurse, and I started to think I might not have the courage to be in India and be able to handle what I thought would be the situation there, how the people were living in poverty. So between those two factors, I switched from the charter class at Callison to COP for my junior fall, and then I went to Vienna for my junior spring. And I don't think the person is here, but the interesting thing was toward the end of the spring semester, I was at the Prater Park in Vienna, and I was on the big Ferris wheel, and who gets in the compartment with me but was a Callison student coming back from India. So I got to hear about your Indian event, kind of the rotation. But I knew I wanted to know more, so I'm so grateful to be here because this gives me, I really needed to be here so I could hear what it might have been like if I had mine. So thank you.
Well, I thought I was going to be the only person that hadn't been to Bangalore. I'm Bea Boston, and I grew up on Brenda Boston. It's hard. I'm from New York City, from Harlem, and I first met a couple of Callison students in Seattle, Washington, when I was the first World Deputation Exchange student in Seattle from Harlem, New York. And quite a world change. And when I got to this school in Seattle as their special girl from Harlem, I met a group of wonderful people who I've subsequently now known for the last 40 years. And that's how I got to Callison. By the time I had graduated in Seattle, I'd been to a dozen schools in my life. And was a high school dropout and had a very difficult educational life, as you can imagine, with 12 schools and you're only in the 10th grade. So I had dropped out of high school, but I was always smart, I thought, but I just couldn't handle New York City. So I went into the airlines after high school, finally, when I did graduate, and I continued to come to California visiting my longtime friends here on this campus, and knew of Bangalore and came to the colloquiums, isn't that what we used to call them? Being allowed by Dr. Meredith and other teachers, professors, to sit in as a student that wasn't even enrolled at the university, but was allowed to be in all of the classes when I visit here and felt such a part of. This is why I'm so confused. This says 72 and 77. Because I really, my spirit was here with Bangalore too, and I started when everyone in Bangalore, from Bangalore too, was leaving. So anyway, to make a very long story, Wendy Wiles, I was in the airlines when all of this visiting was going on. I was with TWA. And Wendy Wiles was one of our friends, and Wendy Wiles had offered me an opportunity with some other people to go travel to South Africa. And so I left TWA, and then the trip fell through. So we didn't get to go, and I went to work in radio and continued to visit here, and the next thing you know, one day Dr. Meredith says to me, "Would you like to go here?" You know, I've been visiting for so many years. Is there a way that I can do this? I'm on vacation from a radio station in Seattle. Is there a way? 4 days. We made it happen. With a kid with no money, you know, with not very good educational background at the time. And we made it happen. I went back to Seattle. I left my job. I came here, and I hoped to go to Bangalore, but then I got sick. And that was the beginning of my petitioning. So I was probably the only student who didn't go to Bangalore or Japan or Mexico or Canada and still graduated from Callison. So my third world experience is still being from Harlem, New York. It's a monster. I'm a music minister, and for me, that's the roots of my life. And I am so glad that Callison, boy, I cannot tell you, I'm so happy that this is part of my history and personal story. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Clayton. I started out in Bangalore 3, so it is 73, but actually ended up going both to Bangalore and to Japan. After Bangalore, I decided I was going to leave UOP, leave Callison, went to junior college for a year to get prerequisites to go to University of California. I got some grades because I didn't have any grades, and they wanted everything became 2.0 from here, which didn't get you anywhere. And during that year off, got married to my wife. Then decided, what am I, nuts? Callison was great. And figured it out, came back, took some very valuable classes before I went to Japan, Leonard Humphrey's classes on Japan, but one that stuck with me was Dr. Van Alstyne's class. I haven't heard him mentioned once, but he taught me how to write an essay in a page and a half, which if you deal with business people or politicians is critical because they can't read anything more than about a page and a half. So I use that almost daily for the last 26 years that I've been a lawyer. Went to law school, used my Japan connection to get a job back in Japan at a Japanese law firm for 3 years. My Japanese language got quite good. Came back, worked in international law for about 16 years. Learned from Callison, I think, that I could get into anything and succeed and learn it as I did it. So when Karen and I went to Japan, when we went to India, we went with one suitcase, if you remember, to go for a year. When we went to Japan for a year the first time, we went with 2 suitcases, because there were 2 of us. When we went to Japan the second time to go work for a Japanese law firm, maybe for years, which ended up being 3 years, we had 2 suitcases in a trunk. I have been sent on, I became for Sun Microsystems the trademark spokesman in Asia for quite a while. Taught myself trademark policy, gave seminars to judges in Singapore, testified in front of the parliament in Australia several times, testified in front of government agencies in Japan, Korea, Thailand. Self-taught, sometimes learned the stuff and put it together on the plane. Got sent one time to Davos to give an 8-minute presentation to a commissioner of the European Union on Microsoft and why they should nail them, which they did finally. So I think the Callison experience really helped me with that. It taught me I could go anywhere, fit in with people who were different from me, and do what I needed to do.
Jim Jewell, Bangalore 2. Married another Callison student, Kathy. Fortunate to live in Mount Shasta, a small town in Northern California. Raised our family. Not all the people I hung out with in India made it here today, or even made it back to the university. It's my hope that they're doing well, as well as all of us here are. I don't know if it's as a result of Callison or how we ended up here, but I still can't find enough time to read all the things I want to read and do and see all the stuff I want to do.
I'm Patty Garrett, Bangalore 2. I think it's fair to say I ended up as a Callison student because of co-ed dorm. It shows you something about the decision-making processes that were going on in my residency. I transferred in as a COP student, but I asked to be in the John Valentine dorm, and I didn't like COP and made all my friends among the Callison students, so that's how I ended up going into India as a junior. Also participated in the Mexico program. When my last semester of my senior year, I had the good fortune to take a ceramics class with Alan Wilcox. And as soon as I touched clay, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So
with his encouragement, I worked for a year up the road here at Sears, saved my money, bought a one-way ticket to Japan, and eventually found a family to study with and taught English, and I studied ceramics for about a year and a half. Came back to the States, got a master's degree in art at San Francisco State. And over the next 17 years or so, I started to build up a handcraft business, a line of ceramics that I produced and wholesaled all over the world, and it became pretty successful. I sold that business about 7 years ago so that I could focus on glass, which is what I'm doing exclusively now. So I'm just really happy with what I'm doing and feel extremely fortunate to have the freedom I do. A couple weeks ago, I was listening to some old tapes of Joseph Campbell that was on NPR. And one of the things he said was, follow your bliss. And I think that that's really what Callison provided for me, was the permission to do that. And I feel fortunate.
Jane Barron Rechman, also Bangalore 2, class of 72. I teach courses in world religions and also ESL world history at a private school back east in New York. And there are a number of specific things that I want to thank the Callison faculty for. One of the reasons I came here, applied here, and this was like some other people, the only place I applied, was because they had no science or math requirement. It was nice too, but they had no science or math requirement. And I remember specifically sitting in the office with Larry Jackson, and I want to thank him both for allowing me to come to this school, but also for the kindness that he showed that year and the following year, which was in India, you know, wacko. And also to Boyd Matthias for the immense journey by Lauren Isley, and for all of those slides of fly wings that were so spectacular, so gorgeous, that it really gave me an appreciation of science. And actually next year I'm going to be on sabbatical, and I've got to study where religion and science, neuroscience, meet. And I think that partly came from here. Larry Meredith, for all of those incredible speakers that you had at the chapel, the variety of speakers, just fantastic. And the vitality and the thought, and also Larry Meredith is the one who said, math is really imagination, it's wonderful. And I'd never thought of math like that, and I still don't have the capacity to think of math like that. Nonetheless. Kathy Tysinger, you were one woman among a whole lot of men, and you just handled yourself so beautifully. It was a really good role model. Bill Shedler, I already apologized to because I remember him being furious that I got credit for some stupid, lousy paper that I wrote that I really did not deserve credit for. But I did get better because when I took the Lawrence and Joyce class, you know, I began to become a better student. But that was after Mexico, and Manuel was saying earlier about what a incredible impression, and I became a student in Mexico with that program that Vicki Gibson had. And so for all of that, and for all of the experiences and my fellow students, I thank everybody.
Well, I can't follow that. I just ditto everything Jane said. I'm Sandy Cornforth, class of 72, Bangalore 2. And I'm a real estate broker in Fresno. Didn't fall too far from the tree. After college, I did a lot of traveling. I tried my hand at social work, and I taught for 5 years. And I was in the original, migrant program, certified Spanish speaking. I learned Spanish in Mexico with Mickey Gibson. So I did that, but business was my true calling, and I also thank the teachers here, the staff, for opening my eyes, because I really did not get it growing up in Reedley, California. So this was a big world for me, And it's just allowed me to understand people, be a better negotiator, listen to people, don't judge. I think it served us all very well. Thank you.
I'm J.D. Hansen. I went to the, I graduated finally in '76. I was in the first group of 10. I came to Callison thinking I would become a United Methodist minister. During the time I was in Callison, became a Zen Buddhist monk. My Roshi understood my nature better than me, I think. He did refer to me as his Methodist monk. I ended up doing graduate work at the University of Hawaii on the side, so Dr. Van Alstyne and Dr. Anderson said, you know, the only discipline that is really going to combine everything you're interested in history, in religion, in environmental science, is geography. It's one course in geography. I ended up working for the Commerce Department, negotiating or helping negotiate international fisheries treaties, and got tired of actually doing what I call, I hope no one here works for churches or anything, but making it well safe for charter tuna, and went to work for the United Methodist Church when they founded a position on environmental policy, and worked for them for 22 years doing a variety of things. Now consult for them and the Presbyterian Church and the National Council of Churches on bioethics issues and environmental ethics issues. And my daughter is here with me, in part because she thinks she wants to go overseas and spend a year of her studies in India.
How I got to be a dentist in Tucson, Arizona. Doesn't count. I'm profoundly moved. I salute you all. This is the most amazing experience I could imagine. I hope you go out and accomplish half of what we dreamed to do. My name is Phil Dan Jackson.
Emotional and psychological poverty of the United States. Stayed in the social work area. Then I became a lay midwife and did home births in the Deep South and in Portland, Oregon. After that, I started having kids, and I got into some foundation work and was involved with a progressive foundation and helped start their international grants committee for third world countries. And during the time that that existed, I think it gave away over $3 million to third world countries. And currently I'm doing an environmental project down in Ecuador where I'm taking land that has been cloud forest land that has been cut down mostly to put pasture for cattle. And also one thing I got from Callison my first year here, I became a vegetarian, and I'm still a vegetarian. So, I think I'm one of the few. And this project is not only restoring the environment, but it's giving local poor people a right livelihood and hopefully an economic base with which to set a demonstration that you can live in harmony with the environment and make a living and not destroy it. And one last thing, that India's experience changed my life, but what I saw there first was the generosity of people who have nothing. And that is one of the things that I get fed by being in Ecuador. Seeing that again. Thank you.
We have 5 minutes left. If we run out of time after dinner, we'll still have a microphone, so we want to make sure that we can get everybody.
how many people are left in that mixed up? Just keep talking.
Debbie Harrison Atlas, Bangalore 4. My independent study was with a German midwife in a village, and that led me to eventually go to Yale University and get my degree, my master's in nursing midwifery. And I have started doing midwifery services, which I'm quite proud of. I was the first nurse midwife in Hartford, Connecticut, and then I went to Massachusetts and started practicing in nation, and another one in a smaller hospital in Massachusetts. I have a children husband, and 3 children, and one just graduated from George Washington University, and keeping my fingers crossed, he just got a call from National Geographic, and he has a job interview on Wednesday. Keeping our fingers crossed about that, and the second son is at Colby, and he's interested in environmental studies. And unfortunately, my daughter, who we adopted from Paraguay, is severely autistic. But otherwise, life has treated me well. I am kind of going through life crisis, looking for a new job. So, anybody with any ideas, talk to me.